to one of the reflections I was reading this week, a priest was kind of lamenting the options that we get at the beginning of the gospel. They're a little harsh, right? So either we don't bear fruit and we get thrown out, or we bear fruit and we get pruned, right? It's like you can't win either way, and it feels like it's our fault. I said, but, a whole series of events this week reminded me of something that I learned about 21 years ago. You know, I say I like to learn new things every day, but also I forget some of them. Like I have no idea what I learned on Monday of this week. But this I remember, even though it was 21 years ago, because it changed how I looked at things, and it changed a good bit of my life. It started with a story I know I haven't told you, because it was from my time in the Holy Land when I was my last year in seminary. But it's not a very religious story, so I generally don't tell it in homilies. But it worked with the rainfall, and it's what kind of got me thinking about this. So we had just arrived, and I was staying in Tantur, which is a center, kind of a renewal center between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. And most of the people I were with were like evangelical ministers on sabbatical. And I was almost ordained, so I was like completely fish out of water. But whatever it takes to get to the Holy Land, right? So I was stowed away with them, and we made it. We flew into Tel Aviv, and we made it somehow to Tantur, and the local community of people that worked there and helped were all welcoming us, and we had this prayer service, I remember, in the chapel. And they were all going off on their prayers. And this one minister, she was just so disturbed by how dry everything was. She was praying for rain, and it was hilarious because all of the locals just bust out laughing because it doesn't rain in Israel in the summer. It just doesn't. Like, you don't, even the prophet Jeremiah knew better than to ask for rain during the summer in Israel. It doesn't rain. It's the dry season. And you have to store water in your cisterns from the rainy season and use it because that's the only water you're going to get is the water you pull out of your cistern during the dry season. Months and months. The whole time I was there. It's not that there was never a drop. There was never a cloud. So that led me to remember, as the rain started falling, and I was kind of grateful about the rains. I always think of the dryness of Israel when it starts to get a little too dry here. And so the rain started falling, and I was thinking of this gardener from Tantur, from the center, who insisted one day that I go out with him to look at something in the garden. And he was all on fire. You could tell he really liked to do this. I think he probably did it for every guest that came through Tantur, and I'm glad that he did it for me. So he brought me out into the garden, and he showed me the grapevines. And they were strange, like it was worth looking at. These grapevines were trellised, not in hedges like you'd see in California, and not along a fence like you'd see at my dad's house, but like a foot off the ground, like ground cover, but trellised, supported about a foot off the ground, with the grapes hanging underneath the leaves. And on cue, I said, so why do y'all do this? You know, because I knew that's what he wanted me to ask. And he said, no, it's because without rain, it would take too much water to help the grapes grow. But this way, every morning the dew comes, and because they're close to the ground, the dew settles on the leaves and drips to the roots, and the grapes are watered every morning by the dew. I said, oh, that's nice. Still not sure why. Like, I didn't plan to get into grape farming. I wasn't sure what this was all about. He said, no, you really should go back and read John chapter 15 again. I said, okay. And I went and I re-researched my Greek to make sure I got this right for y'all. So when Jesus says, he takes away every branch in me that does not bear fruit, the Greek verb is hairo. Hairo means a number of different things, but primarily it means to raise up. When John says, has Jesus say, and I will raise you up on the last day, that's airo. When the Father raises Jesus from the dead, That's airo. And in fact, I went and checked the dictionary just to make sure. And the first like 4 or 5 translations are to lift up, to raise up, to pick up off the ground, and then to cast away as like the 6th definition. And okay, so, you know, some guy in Washington or someplace was trying to translate the scriptures out of out of Greek. And there's this branch that doesn't bear fruit. Well, he's got to choose between a translation that says, and I will lift up the branch that doesn't bear fruit, or I will throw out the branch that doesn't bear fruit. Well, of course he's going to throw out the branch that doesn't bear fruit, because the guy never met Jesus. Like, that's not what Jesus says he does about anything, right? I mean, this is crazy. But on top of that, he didn't know anything about how horticulture works in the Holy Land and how it worked for thousands of years in Jesus' time. And so, like, this changes everything, right? If you don't bear fruit, why are you not bearing fruit? It's because you fell down off the trellis. It's because you got in the dirt. It's because because somebody stepped on you, because you're weak and couldn't hold to the trellis, or you got frustrated and didn't weave yourself in with the other branches because they were bothering you. But you're not bearing fruit. And so what does the Father do? What does the vine dresser do? He comes and he lifts you up and weaves you back into the trellis. He comes and lifts you up so you can be strong, so that you can stop rotting on the ground, so that you can grow and there's room for the fruit to grow below you. That's awesome, right? I mean, that's incredible. And someday I'm going to start a lobbying campaign for us to fix the translation. But but even if we don't, just to know that when Jesus talks about us being the branches, himself being the vine, all of us connected to the vine, and it's true. If we get disconnected from the vine, I've seen what happens to branches that get disconnected from the vine. We have a pile of them over there. They dry up, right? And then they get burned, right? So don't get disconnected from the vine. But that's very different than being weak, than having sin, than being broken, than being stepped on, than falling from the trellis and needing to be picked up. Because the Father will come and pick us up so that we can grow strong. And this is hard for churches, but important. When we're strong, he's going to prune us. But you know why? With a lot of plants, and maybe even with some people, only new growth bears fruit. Right? Old growth doesn't bear fruit. The old growth will put on new shoots and new vines if they're teased into it. They'll put on leaves, but they won't put on grapes. It's only this year's growth that puts on grapes. And so every year they trim the vines so that they have to put out new growth, and the new growth puts on grapes. So Jesus is saying, when we kind of get to be old wood, you know, and we're solid and reliable and kind of fixed, set in our ways, he's got to trim us so that new growth shoots out from us, and that new growth will be fruitful, which is also harder than the first, but beautiful. It's not a super creative story, and I don't have a lot of conclusions for this, but just what a kind of beautiful thought to sit with this week. Being the branches, Jesus the vine, and that his Father, our Father, the vine grower, will lift us up when we're fallen and broken, will care for us and nurse us back to health. And when we're strong, he'll trim us a bit so that we can be more fruitful.